everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining. You're here for Ford Motor Company Building the Future of American Manufacturing, hosted by republicEn. I'm Angela Larck, Engagement Director here at republicEn. If you're new to us, we're a community of conservatives who care about climate change. One of the reasons we host conversations like this is because we believe markets drive innovation. Good policy can create the right conditions, but it's the people and the businesses that build all the things, solve the problems, and compete. That's exactly the perspective Ford brings to today's conversation. I have to admit, I was especially excited when we started planning this webinar. I grew up with an auto mechanic dad, so cars were always a big deal in our house. 16-year-old me drove a 1987 Ford Mustang and thought it was pretty much the coolest car on the high school lot. In fact, I'll throw a picture of it in the chat for y'all. We're going to start today's event with a presentation from Ford's Evan Belser. Bob will jump in with questions and comments along the way, and then we'll open it up for Q&A so you can ask your own questions. For the Q&A, please raise your Zoom hand and someone from the republicEn team will call on you. If you're newer to Zoom, you can raise your hand by clicking the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and selecting raise hand. If you'd rather use the chat, that's perfectly fine too. Chelsea and I will be keeping an eye on both throughout the webinar. So now let's talk about republicEn's Executive Director, Bob Inglis. Bob served 6 terms in Congress representing South Carolina's 4th District. Today, he leads republicEn and continues to make the conservative case for free enterprise-based climate solutions. Bob, thanks for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, Angela, for setting all this up. And we're very excited today to have this topic that I have been talking about ever since I met Evan Belser at a New York City Climate Week event back in the fall. And Evan, really, I have been talking about you everywhere I go because of what's going on at Ford. It's really pretty exciting. And so that's what we want to talk about today. So let me introduce everybody to our friend Evan Belser. Evan let's see, he's a inactive lawyerism. You know, I'm a recovering lawyer. There's a difference between being an active lawyer and a recovering lawyer. I'm in recovery. I'm also a recovering politician. Anyway, so Evan went to law school at the University of Vermont, and after doing mathematics and philosophy at the University of Colorado Boulder. Now, Evan, that's really pretty interesting. Mathematics and philosophy. We got to get into some of that here, except you'll leave me on the math part. Anyhow, so then had some time at the EPA with particularly air issues, as I understand it, Evan, and then 4.5 years ago, went to Ford and has been particularly involved here lately as a policy strategist and Deputy General Counsel at Ford in dealing with the development of Ford's new platform, this EV platform, which is the thing that I got so excited about when I heard Evan speaking in a small group of folks at New York City Climate Week. So, Evan, thank you for being with us. And I should also make sure that everybody knows Chelsea Henderson up there. There you see her. You hear her on the podcast, and she'll be joining me in sort of posing some of these questions to you, Evan. After we hear from Evan, he's got some slides to show us, I think. So, Evan, first of all, did I get all the bio just right?
Yeah, that's it. That's right. I've got a background in environmental regulatory. I brought that to Ford, and now I run part of the legal department here. And bit by bit, like it or not, policy and law has all the more influence on a company's overall strategy. So that's a lot of what I'm doing, and there's a lot to it. We're a big place, but really happy to talk with you today about the universal electric vehicle and China, and it couldn't be a more interesting place to be.
Yeah, it really is an interesting place to be, and what an exciting time at Ford. Anyway, but let me not steal your thunder. Tell us what you got to tell us about what Ford's doing.
You bet. I'm just gonna, if I'm doing it right, you'll be seeing my screen, and I'm gonna go to full mode so you can see it even better. Please let me know if that's not right. Thank you again for having me, Bob, Chelsea, Angela. You guys are great to work with. I'm going to take 15 minutes or so, tell you a few things I think might be helpful to see the conversation. Welcome your questions before and after. It's only about 10 slides, so it's not going to be too much. So first things first, before we get into any particular thing, this Ford Motor Company, 124 years. We've got the deep roots in America, not only in manufacturing, but culturally, we're a big part of the communities where we operate. We're a big part of all kinds of positive things happening in this country. For example, we're MLB's official sponsor starting this season. That's at Nats Park, not too far from my office. Michigan Central Station, I thought I'd highlight. That's an amazing billion-dollar renovation, turning what was a decrepit old train station in Detroit into just a wonderful shining beacon of economic development in a neighborhood that is just thriving. Team Rubicon, one of many examples where we're supporting on the ground Americans doing great work. So we take it seriously being part of the country. That's part of our culture. That's part of our values. When it comes to the numbers, there's no question we are America's top auto producer. This is brand new data covering 2025 calendar year. We have the most vehicles assembled in the U.S., most exported that were made here, most hourly workers in the U.S. We never left. We're still here, and that's a big part of who we are, and that is not changing even as consumer preferences change, as technology changes, as powertrains change. So something really important to say before we get into talking about EVs, we're going to talk a lot about that. It's a very interesting conversation. Customer choice is fundamental for us. It's been 124 years of relentless pursuit of what is it that the customer wants. And our customers range a lot. We are number one in commercial vehicles, for example. So we are especially strong in trucks and vans and a number of other commercial applications. Increasingly, it's not just the vehicles, it's the services that come along with the vehicles, so that when you're running a fleet, you got the best intelligence on where your vehicles are. Are they being run correctly? Do they need maintenance? How are your drivers doing? There's all kinds of ways that we can help fleet owners do better. Electric and hybrid, we're number one in hybrid vehicles, number one in hybrid trucks in America, rather. The F-150 is the best-selling vehicle for 49 straight years in a row. We got the right formula there. We've been the number one seller of EVs for several of the recent years. We're big in off-road and racing, and so we think it's important to follow the customer. We think they're right, and we're seeing changes. We're seeing new adoption, especially in electrified category. But the pace of change is hard to predict. It's always been hard to predict, but it's even harder now that you've got fundamentally different powertrains available right there in the same brand for customers to go to their dealer and choose what's right for them. So I sort of set the table. Next, I just want to focus on one very big and important thing, which is the ascendancy of Chinese automakers. So here's just for effect, this is a BYD tanker. China has grown exponentially in their volume of vehicles that they manufacture. This is just the last 25 years or so. 15 years of intensive and top-down industrial policy in China has allowed their companies that make vehicles, that make components, that manufacture, that provide software services, everything that goes into making these complex vehicles. They've given them a little more ability to take risks. They've given them more advantage and to compete ferociously with one another, and they've come out with some very advanced technology, and they've got incredible fitness as companies, and that is now scaling up and translating into growth, significant growth in market share in many markets all around the world. This is true for all vehicle categories, but it's especially true for plug-in vehicles. Most EVs that are sold in the world are sold in China. China also regulates the demand side. And so customers have strong influences on them, carrots and sticks, to influence what they buy, which is, of course, relevant when on the supply side, when companies deciding what to make. I don't have all the stats up here. It's too much detail, but look it up if you're curious. The rate by which Chinese brands are gaining market share in Europe, in Australia, in South America, most parts of the world is astonishing. Soon they'll be coming to Canada. There's a limited relief. Prime Minister Carney recently announced for trade barriers. And so I think soon here in North America, we're going to be seeing just across the border lots of Chinese-made EVs that I think are going to garner attention. And I think are going to prompt some tough conversations on policy and otherwise in the United States. In the US, there's no categorical prohibition on Chinese-made vehicles coming here, but there are a lot of headwinds, including trade barriers. There's some rules on connected vehicles about communications technologies and where they're made and whether they can be brought here and others. And so you're not seeing much here, but that's in part by choice and in part a matter of policy, and policy can move. There's a lot of bipartisan concern about China, but frankly, there's not a lot of outcomes. And so we're saying that a little more loudly as time goes on to try to prompt the conversation about common interest, bipartisan interest, one that advances climate goals, that advances our global competitiveness as a country. There's a lot of common interests that can be served by having this conversation about what's right for the domestic auto industry and how that can also be right for the country. Our answer, among many, but this is our primary answer coming out next year, is the universal electric vehicle. We haven't revealed this vehicle yet. It's just begun to be on the streets in camouflage, and there's some websites with some pictures of it. But we had years ago sent off what we call the Skunk Works team to work in secret, specifically to develop ground up, purpose-built electric vehicle platform. Not only the vehicle itself that can be used to make a variety of different top hats, different types of vehicles, sedans, trucks, vans, etc., but also how it is that it's manufactured in the first place. And so it's been 100 and something years since we invented the moving assembly line. We are now inventing the assembly tree, where there are 3 different major components of the vehicle that are made independently in parallel, and then they come together in the last stage. I'm oversimplifying, but that's the gist of it. And these are all in service of folding in the learnings from our first generation of mass-scaled electric vehicles and providing customers with unparalleled value and doing so with great efficiency. Just to say a little bit more about the learnings from the Mach-E, E-Transit, and F-150 Lightning. These vehicles are still on the road. Customers love them. We had announced all of these in around 21, 22, 23 is when they really scaled up. And we found customers loved them. We also found, no regrets, but we found that the demand was not what we thought it was going to be, ultimately. And we got really earnestly got to learning why and what were some of the barriers. And there are many. There's no one answer. And every individual customer makes their own choices. But one of the ones I want to highlight here is we found that a lot of folks say they want a full-size truck or a full-size crossover SUV, that they also want 300 plus miles of range, but they also want the vehicle to be affordable. And with current technology, that's not, kind of can't have all of those. There's trade-offs, especially as you make a vehicle bigger. It needs more battery to go that far. You have that much more battery, it's that much heavier. Then you need more equipment to be sure that that's a crash-worthy, safe vehicle, and so on. So there's a number of engineering decisions that need to be made. The universal EV platform takes those learnings, and to be sure, there are going to be great applications where people are going to love having a full-size electric truck. But we think that a lot more folks are going to be glad to get into this vehicle because it is, for example, the first will be a midsize 4-door electric pickup truck that starts at $30,000. And that can be a real game changer. We're investing $5 billion creating or securing 4,000 jobs. These are in Louisville, where we're going to make the vehicle, and in Marshall, Michigan. I just was touring the Marshall plant where we're making the batteries. There's a few pictures there on the right side of the Marshall plant where we're making our own batteries now. This thing is fast as a Mustang EcoBoost, and has more storage than a RAV4. And so we think that this is the next evolution of our electric vehicle product lineup for those customers who want it. And we think that this is going to position us not only to bring this first midsize 4-door pickup truck to market, but to use the efficiencies of the underlying skateboard, they call it, for the electric vehicle and the architecture to also build efficiently and in a very cost-effective manner additional vehicles in different body styles. Last slide here, just to get the conversation going. I know some of you want to talk policy. I love talking policy. I think these three categories are probably the biggest ones for conversation. Emissions, I'll start there. I mentioned I was at EPA a long time. It's my strong suit. But to be sure, federal and state emission standards matter quite a lot. As you may know, they are a fleet-wide requirement. So an automaker needs to show on average a fleet, production weighted average of their fleet meets certain requirements. And there's flexibilities about how long it takes to show compliance and some other things. But in general, when it comes to traditional air pollution, which was what was regulated for the first 50, 60 years under the Clean Air Act, it was really a matter of better vehicle engine design, better filters, catalysts, things that chemically change the emissions into something that's less harmful to air for people's respiratory health. And amazing strides there, fantastic work. We're down to where there's nearly zero emissions of criteria or traditional pollutants. But the real conversation now in the policy space is on climate pollution. That's fundamentally different. There's no filters and catalysts that capture carbon in a vehicle, right? So if fuel is burned in the engine, the amount of carbon in that fuel is coming out the tailpipe. Now, of course, you can improve fuel economy through lighter weight. Years ago, we changed the entire F-Series to aluminum from steel, dropping a lot of weight and improving the efficiency of that vehicle. Aerodynamics matter. Obviously, better management of combustion matters for fuel economy and therefore for carbon emissions. But there are some significant limits, and frankly, we're kind of up against those at this point. There's not a lot of additional return to get on investments in these categories. And so when it comes to a manufacturer's whole fleet, material reductions are really only possible going forward through more electrification. And that can be any number of ways. Again, we sell more hybrid pickup trucks than anyone in America, and hybridization is commonplace now, and there's all kinds of those, including regular hybrids where there's no plug, but you nonetheless have the benefit of a hybrid engine, especially in city driving. Plug-in hybrids, where you've got some amount of range just based on a battery. Maybe it's 30, 40 miles, but that's really good for a lot of folks who are just going around town, saves them a lot of money, saves them gas, reduces their emissions. Soon, we're going to be announcing some electric range extender vehicles where the vehicle is only ever driven on an electric powertrain, but it has an internal combustion engine on board in order to charge that battery when the charge gets low. That's a really promising technology, especially for larger vehicles. And so that's how it is that automakers are going to be able to reduce carbon emissions going forward. And that's fine. And we have some ability, automakers, to influence customer behavior, providing compelling products through pricing, marketing, of course. But ultimately, in America, at least, we don't regulate the customer. Shouldn't. And so it's up to them to decide what to buy. And so in that respect, customers are largely going to set the pace for the electrification of vehicles in America, and therefore for the commensurate carbon reductions that come with that. Complex space here, a lot of action in the last year, especially with respect to federal and state standards. California and EPA are not getting along so well right now, and so we have to work with both of them as they work that out. For our part, we seek a stable, singular GHG standard. We think that overall that is better for the industry, so we can foster business planning, so we can stay aligned with science and customer choice. We want to reduce carbon emissions over time, and we want to make sure that this reflects our need to continue to have strong value in manufacturing in America. Next major category is incentives. This has seen a lot of action in the recent years. There are so many kinds. I won't unpack all of them, but generically on the supply side, there are incentives like tax incentives for certain conduct, certain manufacturing conduct in America. There are Department of Energy loans that are favorable term loans that are there for ventures that are a little too risky for conventional banks, but are nonetheless promising and helping serve certain policy goals. On the demand side, those are generally to directly influence customers' behavior. They work without a question. If you drop the price on a vehicle, it's going to change how many people choose to buy that vehicle. And that, of course, has indirect effects on those companies who make those vehicles. We see all that. We had the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, based, passed solely by members of Congress on the Democrat side. Those that was around for a few years. That generated significant focus on compliance with credits to bring down the costs for commercial vehicles, for retail vehicles, for charging projects, for other things that are relevant to this conversation. It's been about a year this week since the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed last year. Did a lot of things unrelated to this, but with respect to incentives, eliminated or phased out most of those. Notably, though, there is still the production tax credit that was first enacted by the Inflation Reduction Act and narrowed down, but preserved at its core in last year's legislation. And that remains for manufacturers who make batteries in America. That includes Ford. We intend to meet the requirements, the very strict requirements of that tax credit, and we think that's a really important way to keep a level playing field with China, who continue to have significant dominance in all things batteries, battery manufacturing, supply chain for batteries, down to mining and processing of critical minerals. And last, trade. As ever, trade's always been important for the auto industry. That's nothing new. There's been a lot more attention on it. Current administration has a new approach. There's more tariffs than we'd seen in the past, but it's still the same essential type of policy levers that are being pulled and adjusted with industry and input and diplomacy around the globe. We think that trade barriers against Chinese vehicles are appropriate in light of some of that top-down industrial policy that we think is not fair, is not serving a free open market. But whenever we say that, we also say we need more in trade policy. Back to the UEV conversation, we want to compete on quality and cost and have compelling vehicles that people want to buy from us instead of our counterparts and our competitors who might be from China. The United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement is in the spotlight right now. Officially, there's a review period as we speak this summer. We've, for our part, believe that having an integrated North American supply chain without trade barriers between Canada, Mexico, and the United States is a really important way for us to meet some of our cost goals, to have regional supply chains so that we can compete with manufacturers, including from China, who also rely heavily on regional supply chains. And so we think that that's a strength. And we advocate for preservation of a lot of the USMCA, which was struck during President Trump's first term. Last, but certainly not least, while there's not a lot of attention on it in the current Congress, we have in the past, I've personally lobbied on legislation that would acknowledge the carbon intensity of products as they pass over borders. There's a lot of, my primary interest in that is because I see bipartisan interest and support for that. Where currently my colleagues in Europe are working on the early stages of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. There are some learnings there, but overall, it seems like a promising, maybe not in the near term, but midterm promising way to talk about how we could find bipartisan interest in acknowledging that things made in America generally have a lower carbon footprint than made in a lot of other countries. And if that's an advantage, we should talk about that and maybe we could put it to work. So I'll stop there, said a whole lot, feel a little bit uncomfortable just talking that long in a row, but I would love to hear if any of this is making sense and take your questions.
Well, that's very helpful, Evan. And Angela got to put her car, a picture of her car in the chat. I wish I had a picture of my favorite Ford that I had, which was I bought a Ford Focus wagon used, had 80,000 miles on it. I paid $5,000 for it, and I think we finally gave it up at 280,000 miles. It was the best car ever. I mean, what a deal! $5,000, and it went all those miles. I think really I got about 200,000 miles out of it. Anyhow, so but Evan, what you're talking about, that's that thing where we heard that we have here a four-door pickup truck that can sell in the $30,000 range. That's just really remarkable because yesterday I decided to look up what would an F-150 cost me in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. And the answer I was getting was basically, I've seen a lot of 66, $67,000. I know they're supposed to be 50, but it's really, they're all the ones at my local dealer were basically 66 or 67. And so you're talking about a $30,000 four-door pickup truck that can go 300 miles. That's pretty amazing.
We think so too. And relative to a full-size F-150, it's not full-sized, but nonetheless, we think it's going to be just right for a lot of customers. It's got the utility of an open bed. It's got a frunk, which a lot of pickup drivers are always looking for secure, private storage, which is hard to find, unless you got a snow cover and everything else. So there's a number of ways where we think this is going to be just right for a lot of people, for a lot of families.
Yeah. And we may have, Angela may have found it, but she was, asked her to look for a picture that our colleague Wynn Lee sent to us from a recent trip she's on in Mexico, where you can you can see you can see the car that she saw in Mexico, and it's pretty sporty. Let's see, she's going to find it. It'll be soon. It's and you will probably have a big reaction to it, Evan, because you see who the manufacturer is. It's pretty scary for you. There's the the BYD thing, because that market share you're talking about, and the cost. And as I understand it, Latin America, China is, okay, this goes to the trade part of your presentation. China may be dumping those sort of at like a $20,000 range, right? In Latin America, is that what I've read?
Yes, I don't have all. It's a big world, but that's the overwhelming, theme, which is that they are coming. They have overcapacity. There's more manufacturing capacity and throughput in China than the market might otherwise call for, and there's top-down industrial policy that has led these companies to have that kind of overcapacitization and are otherwise able to go to market and sell. I don't know if it's at a loss. There's not enough transparency, but there's a lot of them, and they are undercutting traditional competitors in those markets.
Yeah.
And and they're people go and they drive them and they choose the Chinese vehicle all the time.
Yeah, and everybody just heard that's a careful practicing lawyer. I used the charged term dumping, and he was very careful not to use that term. Did you notice? Because he is a deputy general counsel of Ford Motor Company, so he's got to be careful about using any word like that. But I'm a recovering lawyer and a recovering politician, so I can just use those words. In any event, it is a reality that somehow BYD is selling cars pretty cheap in places like Mexico, and the market share in Europe is rising, and so yes, we're Evan. Here's what I've been telling people as I've been out and about since meeting you at New York City Climate Week, is shaky ideologies are eventually overcome by economic realities, and it seems to me that that's what we're talking about here, is the economic reality that Ford Motor Company faces is worldwide company that now has a competitor that's really good at making electric cars. And you're really in quite a race. And I keep comparing it, and you tell me whether I've got it right, to the Sputnik moment. Now, let me explain to all the young people on the call. Sputnik, this is something you can read about in the history book. It was basically that the Soviet Union launched a satellite, and they were the first in space. And it caused President Kennedy to say at Rice University in September of '62, "We're behind, but we intend to make up." And so I see what's happening here as a Sputnik moment. I'm not sure it's recognized yet. Do you think it's a Sputnik moment, Evan, or do you think that I'm overstating that?
I think you should keep saying that, Bob, because I would like to believe that it'll eventually become true. And here's why I say that is because I came to Ford at a time when I saw that I heard people talking about it, but only once I came into the company did I really understand just how significant the moment is. And the charts I showed about the growth of Chinese manufacturing. We talk to policymakers, we talk to stakeholders, we talk to all kinds of other folks, and they hear us. But it does take time for the gravity of it to set in. And I believe that that's going to start happening as people see BYD vehicles in Canada. It's already happening as just example here. I was just in Germany. Everyone who goes abroad, they come back and they tell me all the Geely vehicles they're seeing wherever they were and how fast they're going. Uh, you're seeing them hiring people all over the place of every kind of vocation you can imagine, right, to run a car company. And so bit by bit, it's becoming real for more people. And that's validating what they've already heard somewhere else, which is that as a matter of policy analysis, they're the biggest player in the market now where they just never were.
Yeah.
And so we've been saying that for some time. It's a joy to have Jim Farley as our CEO, who is unambiguous about our main competitor is China. He drives a Chinese EV sometimes in order to make his point and to understand the competitor's technology. And so we think it's that level of importance, and we think that we're obviously going to act in Ford's best interest, but we think that there's a common interest among a lot of our competitors to rise to this moment and make sure that we've got the best ingenuity, the best manufacturing, the best fitness as automakers, that we can do that in America. We've done it before, and I think we can do it again. The Chinese have really upped the ante, but I think that we can answer.
Yeah, and I'm gonna hand it over to Chelsea here in a second to start seeing some questions from the chat. But one more from me, if I may. I grew up in Bluffton, South Carolina, and I remember when the first, I think it was a Toyota, came to Bluffton. So I would have been a kid growing up in the 1960s, 70s in Bluffton, South Carolina. We had 1,000 people in the greater Bluffton area back then, and somebody drove into town with a Toyota, and we all laughed at him. We chuckled. We said, "Have you seen that little car?"
Yeah.
And because we were driving around in big old hunkers, and lo and behold, the Japanese nearly ate our lunch. Lee Iacocca saved Chrysler with the minivan, and otherwise things were really disrupted. And so the thing that I hear though about the EVs is the fear that you're not going to be able to charge them. And of course, we hear at republicEn, where we talk to conservatives about, you're going to be able to charge this thing. And the thing that's interesting to me is to think about the difference between the Inflation Reduction Act's attempt to deploy charging stations, which was really disappointing in terms of the number, right? Compared to the number that, say, free enterprise through an outfit like a small company, Elon Musk company, has put out charging stations. And so is there a way to reassure the people we're trying to talk to that, hey, free enterprise can deliver the product plus the charging at speed and scale? Do you think can we make that claim?
I think there's a lot of examples of that. Tesla's a huge one. The charging companies that are out there now are they're mostly, I think their models are free enterprise. They're privately held companies. They are watching closely and advocating for policy to help them along the way, put wind in their sails. But ultimately, they've had enough ability to convince their investors that there really is a future where these assets are going to be used. There's going to be return on that investment, and I think they're right. Right now, I mean, there's any number of sources you can go to where you can just see the sheer number of charging stations that have come online. It's still spotty, depends where you live, but most people won't have a hard time with it. In our experience, most people don't use public chargers, or not often. It's a few times a year. They usually charge at home, and only once they drop to 40% or whatever, because and again, everybody's got their own use case, but the charging getting easier, much faster. I myself, we've got one car family. I got 3 kids. We've only had an EV for the last 3.5 years, 4 years, and it adds a little bit of time to the car trips, but that's not that many times a year, and it's not so bad to intentionally sit down and have lunch with your family on a car trip. So that's not the right choice for everybody. I'm not saying it is, I'll just leave you with this on charging. Um, One of our main learnings was that folks who hadn't been in EV before just hadn't really thought it through, and they had a gas station mentality. They were thinking, where am I going to go charge this thing? When in fact, usually they charge at home. Not everybody, but usually. So one of the things we're doing is called the Ford Power Promise, where right now, if you buy a Mach-E from us, we'll arrange for it and have a level 2 charger installed to your house for you.
Wow.
And that just takes some of the guesswork out for folks. And so I do think there's a lot of storytelling and a lot of analysis to be done, policy wise, private wise, on the charging side. That's an important part of the story. But increasingly, that's not going to be a problem for anybody who's trying to get around with a battery powered vehicle.
Great.
I wanted to just interrupt you guys, even though this is really fascinating. We have some questions from
Okay.
our audience. And so I wanted to invite Larry Howe to pose his question. And you are on mute, Larry, so you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, hey, thanks. Thanks, Evan, for coming today. Give us an update. I've kind of followed a little bit. I think there's been some updates from Ford on their Skunk Works and the project around that. I think it's really great, exciting. One of the things I'm curious about, as a major corporation, I think China got a big, or, technology transfer wise, a lot of countries, the US being a main one, went to China and helped them kind of learn the technology, expand the technology, iterate on it quickly. And it seems like we should be willing here in the US to do the same thing. And I think there was a battery plant conversation. I don't remember if it was a Ford or with one of the other manufacturers, but there were a lot of people that were resistant to having a Chinese CATL, for example, a partnership on the battery, development. And I thought that was crazy. I mean, I just think, why don't we do the same thing that, they did back here? So I don't know, does Ford have any joint ventures, or is that something you're exploring? Thank you.
No, thank you, Larry. That's well said. That is how history went, and that's how we think it should go again, but on stateside. So we have a licensing agreement with CATL, and we are using some of their technology to make LFP batteries at our new plant in Marshall, Michigan, and in Kentucky. It's not a joint venture, so there's no investment. There's 100% Ford-owned plant and operation and company. But as is often the case in auto manufacturing, you license intellectual property where where that makes good business sense. And so we're doing that, and obviously we're not going to be we're learning as we go. Some of the know-how comes with it, but that's happening in parallel while we're also developing our own technology in-house. Ford Ion Park is a research and development center we've got in Michigan, started in 21. And we continue to have a diverse battery supply chain just for risk management. We want to spread it out. But that you put your finger right on a very important conversation that we're going to need to keep having, which is, sort of sometimes falls into the decouple or de-risk conversation with China. But more specifically to your point about the role of licensing agreements, we think that that's an important way. There's no scenario where U.S. companies go off and just like independently catch up with the battery technology that China currently has. They for better or for worse, 15 straight years they've been at it and iterating and using real world data at volume, and they folded that back into each generation. So we're coming with U.S. made batteries that we'd rather make them here than import them. And so for this first venture in Marshall and in Kentucky, it's with licensed CATL technology.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
We have another Larry. So everybody who is important to us in the eco right is named Larry. Larry Linenschmidt, do you want to pose your question to Evan?
Thank you, Chelsea. Evan, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate your thoughts. The question I have is more of a follow-up on batteries, and then a question about China. So the battery part, do you see Ford expanding the battery operation beyond cars, to build best systems? And if so, what do you think your timing will be, and what incentives might be necessary to overcome the Chinese lead? And then second, here in Texas, we do have some regulations called the Lone Star Infrastructure Act,
Yes.
which prohibits, if you're familiar with it, it prohibits purchasing materials for our grid or other secure areas from adversarial countries. Do you think at this point, I look at the Chinese economy, I see all kinds of issues. we're concerned, or our legislators and certain people are very concerned about the back door and how China could shut down our system. It seems to me that given China's need for exports, that it would be there would have to be some change in circumstances for China to take that kind of step and in effect damage their reputation as an exporter. So there's a lot there, and again, thank you. I appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. No, that's a great. I'm glad you're calling from Texas too, because on battery storage, Texas leads. You've been putting the state has put more battery storage on the grid than anywhere else in the country.
Yes.
And that's for a lot of reasons, but primarily because it just makes good business sense. If you're running a hospital or a new manufacturing plant or a data center or anything else that's energy intensive nowadays, whatever your source of energy may be, usually it's cost effective to incorporate very, very large batteries, the size of containers on like shipping, and that helps you to reduce your peak demands from the grid and otherwise run a cost effective energy. And so, yes, so the answer is we are moving into battery energy storage. To unpack a big story, we scaled up in 2021, 2022 in anticipation of what we thought would be EV adoption. We found the adoption it kept growing every year, not as fast as we thought. And so we decided in December, we just announced how it was that we're going to repurpose our Kentucky battery plant in order to make battery energy storage systems. So also LFP batteries, industry standard, but we're going to make them here. Overwhelmingly, these products are being bought and imported mostly from China currently for these programs, including in Texas and all over the country. And we'd rather make them here. And so we got a really good reception on the market with that announcement. The new division is called Ford Energy, wholly owned subsidiary of Ford Motor Company. But we are very much committed to being a battery company, learning how to do it here. And when it comes to incentives, the advanced production tax credit is an important part of the business model. It's part of how it is we can justify making it here rather than somewhere else with lower costs. And so we've been advocating to get that in the first place and then to preserve it successfully last July with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So we think that's a really important part of energy in general. To be sure, it wasn't that outside the box of an idea, because a whole nother conversation, but we're all the time working with local utilities and public utility commissions to put vehicle batteries to use on the grid in the same manner, right? A lot of people around the country have a propane generator in their backyard for when the power goes out. Good idea. But maybe you don't need that if you got a truck in your driveway that can run your house for a few days on the battery, right? And so maybe that's the right configuration for you. So it's all batteries. They all can be stored, and we can get a whole lot of more use out of the grid we have if we make storage a big part of it. So I think I got to all the different parts of your question, but yes, it's an adjacency, but we also think that it's part of the core technical, expertise we want to develop.
Sure. Yes, thank you. Yeah, we consider batteries to be the Swiss Army knife of the grid. They fill in when thermal generation is down because of extreme weather, and the gap, from sun and wind changing out, around 6 to 8 in the morning, 6 to 8 in the evening. That's when our batteries really save Texans money and provide reliability for the grid. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Do a little search on TXU. We just launched a program with them for electric vehicle customers in their service territory. Yeah. TXU, the utility, whereby participants can get a little money up front for their trouble. They can charge for free between certain hours of the day when there's a lot of electricity to encourage people to soak that up when the grid otherwise could use a place to put it. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of innovative ways where vehicles can be a big part of making the grid run better.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, would you like to ask your question of Evan?
Yeah, thanks. Evan, nice to have you with us. By the way, I had a chance to visit that Skunk Works facility about 2 months ago.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
Really, really excited to see what Ford is doing in that facility, all the new development, and that new little truck that we had a chance to glimpse very briefly under camouflage. So that's going to be cool. One of the things you brought up is the idea of supporting trade barriers against Chinese vehicles. And of course, trade barriers were in place with Japanese automakers for about a dozen years. And it has its pros and cons. The advantage is it did help to protect the U.S. auto industry in the U.S. market for a while, but it was temporary. But it also doesn't work internationally. So I'm wondering your thoughts on two things. One, how long of a runway do you think, or does Ford think, would be needed for such barriers? And number two, what's Ford's approach to the fact that this is an international automotive marketplace and trade barrier in the U.S. doesn't do anything for Ford's international sales?
These are great questions. The premise is I'm no trade expert, but I'll tell you what I can, which is that we think we need to work with 100% energy on competing on product. All right, so that's the main message I want to leave with you. So we're doing everything we can with that, and we're being clear with policymakers in the U.S. as our home turf what it is we think is going to be helpful toward that goal, and then we can find whatever support we can for that. How long will we need trade barriers? It kind of depends on how long we can ensure that we are still fully incentivized, as I assure you we are, to compete on product. But I do know that our position is that it should not be a permanent fix, because if it's in there and it's a permanent matter, then it takes some of the pressure off and it leads to some of the outcomes that we just don't want over time. And so we support some of these trade barriers, but we also think that they are a temporary matter. Temporary can be years. We see bipartisan support for it. The current Chinese tariffs were enacted in the Biden administration and then re-upped in the current administration. And so we expect them to be around for some time. But yes, it's an international market, and we've been losing market share in many markets around the world. So we're very, very keen to that. And so that is part of our storytelling when it comes to U.S. policy. That's part of our storytelling when it comes to Europe policy. We're there right now because we do a lot of manufacturing in Europe as well. And so I don't have a direct answer, Mark, because there's no magic formula, but it's all hands on deck on all fronts with a goal that eventually we won't need those trade barriers because we can compete without them. That's where we want to get to. There's a lot of reasons why it's hard to get there, especially in part because of some of the unfair practices from Chinese.
I'm going to turn the floor to Matt, and then after that, I'll let Angela pose any questions from the chat from our shy people. So Matt, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thanks. And thanks, Evan, for the presentation and your answers. You spoke a little bit earlier about various use cases that people have for their vehicles, whether EV or ICE, and different family situations. That you have a one-car family with 3 kids, which is probably a logistics nightmare. I've done similar things myself. And I wonder if you have thoughts, or maybe the company has thoughts, or maybe even others on the call about it's hard for me to understand why a mindset hasn't set in more, realizing that many, many American households have more than one vehicle.
Yes.
Yet when we go on the road, we usually only take one. So it seems like, just from a pure economic standpoint, you would want one of those cars to be an EV with a lower total cost of ownership, never visiting a gas station, et cetera, lower maintenance cost. And yet I don't see a lot of that happening, even among people that you might think would be more inclined in that direction. And I wonder if you had any thoughts about that. Incidentally, I kind of do this on a 2-household basis. My daughter lives in the same town I do, so I drive an EV, she drives an ICE vehicle, and when either one of us needs to go out of town, we use the ICE vehicle. So anyway, if you had any thoughts on that, if not, that's fine too. Thanks very much.
I think that's an exact use case where we think there's a lot of room for growth, right? So, folks who bought EVs first in America tended to be, got to be careful speaking generalizations, but broadly speaking, the early adopters were less concerned about initial costs than the early majority or the majority of folks who might eventually get into an EV. People with 2 cars, for all the reasons you cite, we think would ultimately love the choice to get into an EV for one of those cars, including one with a relatively modest amount of range, because they just will realize they probably just won't use it. Obviously there's every kind of commute, but if you're commuting 30 miles a day each way, for example, You can just charge a couple times a week and you're all set. So we think there's going to be a lot of growth there. Why not more? We ask ourselves that all the time. Initial cost still is pretty high. So there's a psychological importance to what's the sticker price on that car and that car. And that one's higher, it's hard. Total cost of ownership is well understood by buyers, but it's not as influential as I think it might be for some. Maybe yourself included, where you really are thinking, no, what's my cost over time? We are number one in commercial vehicles. So we know that in the commercial space, there's a little less emotion involved. They don't so much care what color the car is. They want to know what's it cost to maintain and fuel, and is it reliable? And there we're seeing tremendous interest in electric, especially vans and trucks. And but there, just like on the home front too, there's barriers around uncertainty and actual barriers to getting more charging in place so they feel like they're ready for it. I think there's a lot of reasons folks who would be perfectly open to it, but just there's not a lot of reason to focus on. There's not a lot of people in their immediate community who are driving EVs. They might not understand what the charger is. So I always try to speak about it in really simple terms, not to disparage anybody or talk down to them, but just say, you know, that funny big plug behind your washing machine, that's what, if you have one of those in your garage, you can charge your EV overnight, right? Really basic language just to put it in terms for people to see, oh, yeah, this isn't that hard. But until people have had that experience, someone in their life, or they drive a truck for work or something, it's a little bit more to ask than we had thought it would be. But we'll get there bit by bit.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Evan, about that funny plug that you plug your dryer into, because that is a lot better way than saying whatever, I don't even know what you call the thing that I've got in my garage, but if you call it the actual name, people it's new to them. But yeah, it's just like the thing you plug your dryer into,
Yes.
and then.
Those simple moments can make a difference for some folks who just aren't quite sure.
Yeah, because it's new, and so you have to give that reassurance, and then once the reassurance is there, it's really pretty great. You know, I've read some things that maybe Jim Farley has said, and maybe that Bill Ford has said about the number of the challenge we've got in terms of the capacity in China for innovation through battery technology people and ours. And as I remember, it's something like a tenth. We have maybe a tenth of the number of engineers that they have. I think that's about the number, right? And so that's where I get to the Sputnik moment, is just realizing that we're behind. And of course, the question for this recovering politician, I guess, is it okay in America to do what JFK did at Rice in September of '62, which is to admit it. He admitted that we were behind. No matter, we're going to make up. He also admitted that some of the materials needed for the spacecraft hadn't been invented yet. No matter, we're going for the decade is out.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing where, I think it's what I like to say is when leaders are optimistic, they're saying they believe in the people they represent.
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing, and this is maybe a send-off and a congratulations to Ford, what I'm hearing from your company, Evan, especially from Bill Ford and Jim Farley, is a lot of optimism about, realizing the threat, but then real belief in the ability of this American company to meet the competition. And not just going and belly aching about, we got to protect from the Chinese. No, we're gonna beat them. Like you said earlier, product to product, we're gonna compete with them, right? And so, I don't know, maybe you just want to tell me amen. That's what I'm just congratulating Ford on that kind of optimism.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's right. That's real. That's how it is here. I do think it's important what you said about being honest about the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And saying what it is, not to be defeatist, but just to be honest, so we can rally around the challenge together. Maybe to highlight, that we have a focus on what we call the essential economy, which goes to what we've called a serious crisis in just the sheer number of technicians and other experts who are needed to develop this technology, to scale it up, to manufacture it, and potentially, and relatedly also, a negative stigma sometimes around folks who choose those vocations, and we need to get rid of that entirely. So Jim Farley is one of the most outspoken people on this topic. Just search essential economy. You'll find a number of speaking tours and other efforts and funding that are aimed at getting more Americans involved in this project for the next generation.
I once I have a friend who taught at Clemson University who said that he was on a family trip in a family car when Sputnik was launched. And his mother turned around to him and said, "It is your patriotic duty to become a scientist." So he did. And he basically helped, yes, with all kinds of things scientific. And that's the kind of thing that I wish we could, I want to close on that note of optimism that we can do this if we decide to get with it. It's just really neat for us at republicen.org to have a company engaged in free enterprise that's showing that they see the competition and they're ready to meet it. That's pretty exciting because that proves our case, helps prove our case about free enterprise doing this thing. So, Chelsea or Angela, what else do we need to be doing here before we say goodbye to Evan?
Well, Evan, are you in a rush to jump off? Do you have somewhere else you need to be, or do you have time to clear out the couple of these last questions?
I'll be glad to take on a few more. Yep.
You have a few more? All right. So in the chat from Craig Preston, which is one of our friends out in Orange County, California, he says, marvelous to hear of Ford's moves to lead in the clean EV market. Will Europe's CBAMs help U.S. manufacturing as we have lower carbon manufacturing than most countries? He says, you mentioned a stable regulatory environment is a high priority, and would permitting reform or a small stable prediction carbon price in the U.S. help?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know, to be specific, if this carbon border adjustment mechanism in Europe is going to help U.S. manufacturing. At least in Ford's case, my guess is that we would elect to still make the vehicles in Europe for the European market. That's just because we have a footprint there. That said, though, if we have a supplier in Canada or in Ohio of a particular part, that may be advantageous to source from North America for vehicle manufacturing in Europe. And that directionally, at least, yes, that kind of carbon border adjustment could help and give and recognize the advantage relative to higher carbon economies, including China. The second part, permitting reform, yes, that matters. There are any number of reasons why we shouldn't dig in certain places or it should be done a certain way, but it's very difficult to plan a business when the timeline is wholly unpredictable, and it could be years and years and decades of litigation. And so permitting reform options, we're engaged with that on the Hill here in Washington, and otherwise trying to find more certainty while also acknowledging local values. We've got a lot of history running best practices when it comes to extractive industries to be sure that we're using best practices, including community engagement. A carbon price, as I understand it, that has a lot of promise. And just because I've done a lot of reading and I see a lot of people on all sides of issues saying that is an effective and relatively light way for the government to help push things in the right direction, and is simpler in many respects than a lot of the other incentive-based programs.
We are certainly big fans of carbon pricing here at republicEn. So Matt Weldon asks in the chat, what form will vehicle-to-grid capability take in the new UEV platform?
Not able to reveal that yet, unfortunately. So I just can't say.
Right.
But I will say that we are very active in public utility commissions, including right now in Texas and Colorado, last year in Michigan, trying to make sure that it's really clear for vehicle owners who have a bidirectional vehicle what it is they need to do to put it to use as a bidirectional vehicle. There's a lot of existing rules that are made for other things that are expensive or the timeline's unclear, and we need to make it really easy for folks to decide to put their vehicle to use as a home backup power or potentially eventually to help serve as a resource for the grid. And so there's some really advanced virtual power plant kind of conversations to be had that I think are absolutely fascinating. Our advocacy currently is focused on getting sort of the walking before we can run and making it really easy for vehicle owners to participate.
Now, I have a personal question for my own selfish needs. Um, any talk happening at Ford at putting out a, PHEV or EV form of the Bronco?
I cannot reveal any information on that. Otherwise, the robots will hear me and I won't have a job tomorrow. So
All
I
right.
will
Well,
say one thing we did say was that for the F-150 Lightning, we recently ended production of the current version of that. We did say publicly that the next version of that was going to be a extended range electric vehicle.
okay.
So timing is unclear on that, but we have made that announcement. So that's a little adjacent to what you asked. But there you go.
Greg Cordell, you've got your hand up. We'd love to hear what you have to ask.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Again, this has been great. Bob mentioned earlier the story about in the 70s when we got out of our Chevy Vegas and our Pinto things, and we got into Honda Accords and and things like that, and we experienced a different kind of quality. I think quality was sort of the paradigm shift in what quality was. And I know that just recently I've been in a Leaf, I've been in a Mazda, and I've been in a Tesla with the whole autonomous thing completely. And even there, the user experience is pretty different. There's pretty broad range of experience there. I was just wondering when you mentioned earlier, you used the phrase, or you referred to Chinese quality. Now, what is it that Ford really sort of defines as quality in terms of the user experience? And a sort of an extension of that question is part of that user experience really starts at the dealership. What steps is Ford going to need to take from a consumer education standpoint at the dealership level so that people are being introduced and they get to sit in one of these things, and is there a real emphasis there, or the dealers just saying, no, if they come in looking for a truck, we just give them a truck? Is it responding to what the consumer wants, or are they trying to sort of at least, hey, let me show you something you've never seen before? Is there
I love it.
anything to that?
That was great, Greg. I'll take them each in turn. So on quality, I can't help but the crow a little bit. We were just named by JD Power the number one we ranked first in the industry in quality in 2025. It's first time since 2010 that's been the case for Ford Motor Company. So the term quality is a big one, but essentially it means where you don't need to go and fix the thing in use. And that means the customer's not bothered by it, and it means that overall costs are much lower. And so that means that we're able to bring the vehicles to market at a lower cost if we're not having to spend as much money fixing issues that maybe could have been prevented when we initially built the vehicle. China had for some time been making vehicles that worked just fine, but were not recognized as having world-class quality. But they're there now at a lower price. And so that's the real risk, is that you talk about price, but you also talk about value, right? So back when the paradigm shift, when the Japanese brands came, and then again in the 90s when Korean brands came, it's like this history repeats itself. There was a lot of talk about value. This is not the same vehicle; it doesn't look the same as the Detroit 3, but actually, as my money goes, kind of gives me what I want. I think I might buy one of those. And a lot of Americans, made the hard choice about what's best for their pocketbook, and that was it. To your choice, your point about dealers, we've got a lot of programming with our dealers in order to be sure that they have charging on site, that they have technicians who know how to work on these vehicles, and that they have ready supply of electric vehicles on site and training so that people who come in are all the more likely to get in an EV. In the industry, we talk about butts in seats. It matters. It matters a lot. When you sit down and you push the accelerator for the first time, a new schema opens in your brain, and now you understand what it means to drive an electric vehicle. It doesn't mean everyone loves it. It just means that until you have that experience, you can't concretize the option to maybe buy that kind of a car. So we have those programs at our dealers. We also do funding of independent groups who are really focused on the customer experience, doing ride and drives and other things just to help give folks a chance to try it out and decide if it's right for them. And that matters a lot. The experience of it matters a lot.
That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Evan. This has been a really great session. I always like to remind everybody here that I will email you a recording of the video, most likely tomorrow. Bob, any final thoughts for you? Would you like to send us off with any words of wisdom?
Yes, mostly just a very much thank you to Evan for this opportunity to hear what Ford's doing and really, as I said earlier, to see a company that's engaged in free enterprise, an American company, an iconic American company, as you said earlier, Evan, engaged in free enterprise that's going to meet the competition, I believe, and that's what that really turns our crank here at republicen.org, and so it's great to be with you and look forward to continuing to interact with you, Evan, and with Ford in the months and years to come.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all so much.
See ya. Thanks, everybody.